the 7 most mysterious disappearances of all time. Thousands of humans go missing every day. Unfortunately, the explanation is usually crime, kidnappings, abductions or murder. In other instances, a person can run away to escape something, or forge a new identity. A missing persons case that can't be explained is considered a cold case. Of these cold cases, the vast majority have rational explanations, but investigators simply do not have the physical evidence they need to put the puzzle together. Still, there are a small percentage of cases that seem to defy logic altogether. 1. Lieutenant Felix Moncla disappears mid-flight. The channel that connects Lake Superior with the other Great Lakes flows through the Sioux Locks near Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan. On one side of the channel is the U.S., and on the other side is Canada. The fact that this area is on a U.S. national border makes it a restricted airspace. As such, it was monitored by the Air Defense Command in 1953. On the evening of November 23, 1953, an Air Defense Command ground intercept radar controller at Truex AFP became alerted to an unidentified target over Sioux Locks. He sounded the alert, and an F-89C Scorpion jet was scrambled from nearby Kinross Field. The jet was piloted by First Lieutenant Felix Moncla, Jr., with Second Lieutenant Robert Wilson in the rear seat as radar operator. Ground control vectored the jet toward the target, noting that the target changed course as the F-89 approached it at over 500 miles per hour. Lieutenant Wilson had problems tracking the target on his onboard radar, so ground control continued to direct the jet to the target. For 30 minutes, the jet pursued the radar blip and began to close the gap as the UFO accelerated out over Lake Superior. As ground control watched, the gap between the two blips on the radar screen grew smaller and smaller until the two blips became one blip. Ground control thought that Moncla had flown over the target and that the two blips would separate again as he moved past it. That didn't happen. Suddenly, the single blip flashed off the screen and the radar screen was clear of any return at all. Frantically, ground control tried to contact the F-89 by radio. There was no response. Marking the last radar position, ground control dispatched an emergency message to search and rescue. That last sighting was about 70 miles off Queneau Point in Upper Michigan, at an altitude of 8,000 feet, approximately 160 miles northwest of Sioux Locks. After an all-night air-sea rescue search, not a trace of the plane or the men was ever found. No debris, no oil slick, nothing was ever found. Officials at Norton Air Force Base Flying Safety Division issued a statement that the pilot probably suffered from vertigo and crashed into the lake. However, this was merely speculation and was based on hearsay reports that Moncla was prone to vertigo. The Air Force explained the unknown radar target at first as a Canadian DC-3, then later as a RCAF jet. Canadian officials responded that there were no Canadian aircraft in the airspace over the lake at any time during the chase. The Air Force finally stated that the F-89 had exploded at high altitude, ignoring the fact that this would have left a lot of debris on the lake surface. NICAP investigators found that mentions of Moncla's mission, chasing an unidentified target, had been obliterated from official records. Project Blue Book files simply listed the case as an accident. Off the record, those that were present in the ground control radar room that they have expressed other opinions. They think that whatever the F-89 was chasing directly caused the disappearance of the jet. 2. The ghost crew of the MV Joya. It was built in Los Angeles, U.S., in 1931 as a luxury yacht for movie director Roland West. Naming it Joya, meaning Little Jewel in Spanish, for his actress wife Jewel Carmine. The 69-feet-long wooden ship changed hands in 1936. It was said to have been acquired by the U.S. Navy in October 1941, taken to Pearl Harbor and outfitted as a patrol boat. The Joya ran aground in 1943, and was heavily damaged, but since ships were needed by the Navy, she was fixed. It changed hands in 1948, then again in 1950 and in 1952 when Drive Catherine Lumala, a professor at University of Hawaii, bought it. She chartered the ship to her friend, Captain Thomas H. Dusty Miller, a British-born sailor living in Samoa. Miller used the ship as a trading and fishing charter boat, until the mysterious incident surrounding it 3 years later. There are some ghost ships in the world, but this particular one is known as the Pacific's Ghost Ship. It is listed as one of the 10 ghost ships in the world by some websites, because of the mysterious circumstances in which it was found. Although there are many stories on what may have happened on board, no one knows until today what really transpired on the ship. The disappearance of 16 crew members and 9 passengers, who were on board the ship, remains a mystery so far. It was about 5 a.m. on October 3, 1955 when the Joya is said to have left Apia in Samoa for the Tokelau Islands, which is about 430 kilometers away. According to Wikipedia, the ship was scheduled to leave on the moon tide the previous day, but her departure was delayed because her port engine clutch failed. The ship eventually left Samoa on one engine with the crew and passengers, who included a government official, a doctor, a copra buyer and 2 children. Her cargo is said to have consisted of medical supplies, timber, 80 empty 200-liter oil drums and food items. The voyage was expected to take between 41 and 48 hours, and the ship was scheduled to arrive in Tokelau Islands on October 5. On October 6, Tokelau Islands reported that the ship was overdue and no ships or aircraft had reported receiving a distress signal from the ship's crew. A search and rescue mission was launched, and from October 6 to 12, a Royal New Zealand Air Force plane covered about 100,000 square miles of ocean during the search. But there was no sign of the Joya or any of her crew members or passengers in the area that was searched. On November 10, 1955, the merchant ship Tuvalu was going from Suva to Funafuti when its captain sighted the Joya to more than 1,000 kilometers west from her scheduled route, drifting north of Anilevu. The ship was partially submerged and listing heavily. There was no trace of the passengers or crew, and 4 tons of cargo is also said to have been missing. According to the Wikipedia, the Joya carried a dinghy and 3 life rafts, but all were missing and there were other damage to the ship. The electric clocks on board reportedly stopped at 10:25 and the switches for the cabin lighting and navigation lights were on, implying that whatever had occurred happened at night. The ship's logbook, sextant, mechanical chronometer and other navigational equipment, as well as the firearms its captain Dusty Miller kept on board, were missing. A doctor's bag was said to have been found on deck containing a stethoscope, a scalpel and 4 lengths of blood-stained bandages. An inquiry that was carried out was only able to establish the reasons for the vessel becoming flooded, the condition in which it was found. Numerous theories on the disappearance of the Joya circulated then and even afterwards, but no one has been able to determine what actually happened. A few days after the ship was found, the Fiji Times quoted a source as saying that the ship had passed through a fleet of Japanese fishing boats and saw something they should not have seen. The other theory was that pirates had attacked the ship, killed its crew and passengers and stole the 4 tons of cargo. In July 1956, the ship was auctioned off by her owners to a Fiji islander, David Simpson, who refitted and overhauled her and went to sea again that year. She ran aground in the Coral Sea in January 1957 while carrying 13 passengers. She was repaired and she began a regular trade between Levuka and Suva. The ship ran aground on a reef again at Vatava in November 1959 and floated off during high tide. It was sold to a Robin Mom in the early 1960s, and he also wrote the book, The Joya the Mystery, in 1962. Mr. Mom is said to have sold the Hulk in 1966 to a Major J. Castling Cattle who ran a tourist and publicity bureau in Levuka. The Hulk is said to have disappeared piece by piece, and the process of disintegration reportedly appears to have completed in the late 1970s. On June 22, 2009, this newspaper reported that Captain Lawrence McCaig had turned up at the Fiji Times office with photos of the salvage operation and the Joya's sextant. His father, Captain Robert McCaig, had captained the Digui No. 1, which salvaged the Joya and towed her back to Suva. Mr. McCaig had said that there were many stories about what might have happened to the ship, but 3 remained constant over the years. He said these were that there was a feud with the ship's captain, that there was a dispute among the crew, and that those on board had been taken by pirates. Some people have also commented on the Joya the mystery on the website www.godlikeproductions.com, but so far no one has been able to determine what happened to the crew and passengers on board. Like the stories of other ghost ships in the world, what happened to the Joya there remains a mystery to this very day and is still talked about in some circles. According to the Wikipedia, the 16 crew members of the ill-fated ship and its 9 passengers were still declared as missing in 2012. 3. Frederick Valentich and the strange aircraft. The disappearance of a Tasmanian sailor from the Yadov NSW has rekindled memories of one of the state's enduring mysteries. Over the years, aircraft and ships have vanished without a trace in an area off Tasmania's northwest coast dubbed the Devil's Meridian. Indeed, more ships, aircraft and humans have vanished in Bass Strait than in any other comparable area of Australian water. These mysterious disappearances have encouraged several bizarre theories of UFOs and supernatural occurrences in the so-called Bass Strait Triangle. Ever since George Bass and Matthew Flinders rounded Cape Grim on the northwest coast in December 1798, Bass Strait has been renowned for many peculiar and frightening incidents. In his book, Mysteries of the Bass Strait Triangle, Jack Cloney was realistic about these triangle mysteries. While our American friends discuss the strange Bermuda Triangle and link it with UFOs and the supernatural, we can say that most of our disasters were probably caused by storms, tidal waves, pirates, negligence and other perfectly natural causes, he said. As we all well know, the forces of nature can swiftly whip up giant seas and violent gales in Bass Strait. The King Island Marine Graveyard is evidence enough of this, but there have been disappearances which cannot be easily explained. Chief among these was the disappearance of Frederick Valentich and the single-engine Cessna he was piloting en route to King Island in October 1978. The incident attracted worldwide interest because Valentich reported making contact with the UFO moments before losing radio contact with Flight Service, Melbourne. The Valentich mystery is the subject of the 1980 book, The Devil's Meridian, written by journalists Kevin Killian and Gary Lester. For 6 minutes Valentich described the amazing speed, appearance and maneuverability of the UFO. At the end of this conversation, the engine of his plane was heard to malfunction and radio contact was lost. His last words were, "That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It is hovering and it's not an aircraft." Killian and Lester described in their book how a metallic clicking sound followed for the next 17 seconds. Then there was silence. Despite an extensive search, no sign of Valentich or his aircraft was ever found. That same day, a King Island woman, Geelong youths playing cricket and tennis, and a woman and her teenage son on their way to Cape Otway on the northern coast of Victoria all reported seeing strange lights or objects in the sky. The official response was that Valentich had become disorientated in the twilight zone between dusk and full dark. The theory was he was flying upside down, and had actually seen his aircraft's lights reflected on the water before crashing into Bass Strait. Another famous Tasmanian UFO sighting was of a dome-shaped object which is reported to have landed at Little Oyster Cove near Kettering, south of Hobart, in February 1976. A 39-year-old man said he woke at night to see what he thought was a plane coming down nearby. Thinking it was a crash, he rushed to the area to find a dome-shaped object with bright lights glowing from its windows which had landed on a grassed area. He described watching it for about 7 minutes before it took off with a loud whirring sound and disappeared into the night sky with increasing speed. The following morning he noticed a scorched area on the grass where it had been. 4. The multiple disappearances of the Bennington Triangle. There's been a lot of focus lately on weird happenings in faraway lands. The Middle East, Russia, Asia, even Australia, which from a Can-Am-centric perspective, I'm Canadian, might provide an expanded view of our world. But there are plenty of weird things to look at right here in North America. And today I bring a story from what is arguably one of North America's most beautiful destinations, New England. known for high society, fine dining, world-class skiing, and mysterious disappearances. Vermont, one of the 6 U.S. states that make up the New England region, has been the focus of some of the better minds in anomalous or Fortean research over the years. One place in particular has gotten more than its fair share of attention: Glastonbury Mountain, also known as Green Mountain or the Green Mountain Range, is home to some very strange goings-on, and has inspired some of the wildest theories you've ever heard. The entire area of New England has been the primary focus of renowned author and Fortean researcher Joseph A. Citro. Humorously dubbed the Bard of the Bizarre by the Boston Globe, Citro has written extensively on the weird happenings, disappearances and other phenomena of New England, and especially Vermont. He is the originator of the somewhat little-known Bennington Triangle theory, which is, as may seem obvious, a play on the Bermuda Triangle, and is his attempt to document and explain the disappearance of some 5 different people under mysterious circumstances since 1945, all on Glastonbury Mountain. Citro notes, in his premiere novel Shadow Child, 1987, which deals extensively with the mysteries of Glastonbury Mountain, that the area of what is now called Green Mountain has long been known, through Native American culture, as a strange and dangerous place that is to be avoided at all costs. Citro's apparent familiarity with the history and traditions of the Algonquin peoples, who inhabited the area as early as 8500 BCE, has given him unique insight into the special and dark nature of the mountain. The Disappearances of Midi Rivers, 1945, Paula Weldon, 1946, James Tedford, 1949, Paul Jepson, 1950, and Frida Langer, 1950, are something of local legend in the area. 18-year-old Paula Weldon, who disappeared while on a solo hike on the Long Trail, became something of a celebrity. As the story goes, several people witnessed her departure from Bennington College, with the knowledge that she was headed out for a short hike. 2 elderly hikers reported seeing her on the trail, approximately 100 yards ahead of them, minutes before she disappeared. They claimed that she rounded a corner on the trail, and when they reached the same corner, she was gone, and was never seen or heard from again, despite extensive searches, FBI involvement and even a $5,000 reward for her safe return. Her case became part of local urban legend, as people speculated about her becoming a wild recluse on the mountain, or perhaps fleeing to Canada to marry a boyfriend whose identity she kept secret. There are several coincidences involved in the disappearances, but no real connection between any of the cases has been found. James Tedford, also spelled Tedford or Tedford, disappeared from a bus between stops as it traveled toward Bennington exactly 3 years to the day from Weldon's disappearance. Also, 8-year-old Paul Jepson, who disappeared from his mother's truck, while she tended to her pigs, was tracked with dogs. His scent was apparently picked up and followed to a local highway, which happened to be very near where Paula Weldon had disappeared. The only one of the 5 to ever have been recovered was 53-year-old Frida Langer, who disappeared during a hike with her cousin only 16 days after little Paul Jepson. Her body was recovered 7 months later, near the Somerset Reservoir, which had been searched extensively at the time of her disappearance. No cause of death could be determined because of the advanced state of decay in which she was found. Strange coincidences notwithstanding, there isn't much about these disappearances that warrants Fortean attention, at least on the surface. People go missing, it happens every day, all over the world, and though it's a tragic event, it isn't necessarily anomalous or even all that weird. Except, according to Citro, the Bennington Triangle, an ill-defined area surrounding Glastonbury Mountain and roughly bordered by the region of Bennington itself, bears striking resemblance to the nearby Bridgewater Triangle of Massachusetts. The Bridgewater Triangle, for those unfamiliar, is an area of approximately 200 square miles in southeastern Massachusetts, wherein sightings of UFOs, orbs, Bigfoot, and Thunderbird, as well as cattle mutilations have been taking place on a regular basis for decades, if not centuries. Citro claims that there is similar folklore and history between these 2 areas, and has put forward some slightly strange explanations for the weirdness held therein. Perhaps his strangest explanation is the man-eating stone of Glastonbury Mountain. Making its first appearance in Citro's book The Vermont Monster Guide, 2009, the man-eating stone is exactly what it sounds like. A rock that eats people. No one alive has seen this dangerous anomaly on Glastonbury Mountain. Native Americans knew of it, and warned people away. We can only imagine it as a sizable rock, large enough to stand on. But when someone stands upon it, the rock becomes less solid, and, like a living thing, swallows the unfortunate trespasser. A number of disappearances have been reported on Glastonbury Mountain. Could all these vanished folks have stepped inadvertently on this hungry stone? One in another of his books, Passing Strange, Through Tales of New England Hauntings and Horrors, 1996, Citro describes an inaccessible region, remote, full of dark places, jutting outcrops, vast marshlands and quiet pools. He seems to regard the entire region as a magical land of mysteries and dangers, almost fairy tale-like, but describes a wild, almost untouched wilderness sitting in the heart of American society's upper-crust summer vacation destination. Is there something weird going on at Glastonbury Mountain? Is the Bennington Triangle worth a closer look? Or is a talented author and folklorist trying to sell books through sensational, if difficult to believe theories? The facts are that 5 people disappeared on that mountain, 4 of them without a trace of evidence as to their whereabouts or fate. That alone should get our attention, and who knows? Maybe there is a boulder with an appetite for man-flesh in Vermont. 5. Hippies absorbed by lightning at Stonehenge. There is an unsubstantiated story about the disappearance of a group of campers at Stonehenge in August 1971. At that time, people were allowed uninhibited access to the location day or night. In August of 1971, a group pitched tents in the center of the circle, and lit a campfire. At 2 a.m., a severe thunderstorm quickly blew in over Salisbury Plain. Bright bolts of lightning struck the area, including nearby trees and the standing stones themselves. A farmer and a policeman both said that Stonehenge lit up with an eerie blue light so intense they had to look away. The screams from the campers rang out, and the 2 witnesses rushed to the scene expecting to find injured or dead campers. What they did find shocked the hell out of them. The campers were gone. The smoldering tent pegs and the drowned remains of a campfire were all that remained. Where the hell did the campers go? What happened to the tents? To this day, they have not been found. Considering the tent pegs were smoldering and the rest of the tent was gone leads one to believe that maybe the campers were incinerated by the lightning, if that is even possible. If the story is true, then what could have possibly happened to the group of campers? Stonehenge is positioned at the center of a hub, or network, of alignment ley lines, making it a potential energy portal, or a place of power. There are 14 major ley lines that converge at Stonehenge that form what many believe to be a powerful vortex. One traditional method of locating ley lines is by drawing a line connecting 2 old ancient sites, or churches. Churches were often built on ancient sites to acquire their energy. In some cases churches were built in the site of a henge, ex. Winchester Cathedral. Out of Bury a whole village sits in the middle of a henge. These ley lines interconnect most of Britain's ancient sites. The term ley lines was coined by Alfred Watkins in his acclaimed book Old Straight Track published in 1925. In it he introduced his rediscovery of this natural phenomenon known to the ancients. His theory was that ancient sites around Britain had actually been constructed, or formed, in a given alignment between, and across, the landscapes of Britain. Lay hunters took the concept much further than Watkins and the earlier enthusiasts. Dowsing, flying saucer paths, crop circles, biodynamic farming, and feng shui have all been associated with ley lines. Collections of ley lines have been said to conceal hidden messages, reveal the location of esoteric items, or contain star maps. The existence of ley lines is now one of the accepted tenets of New Age belief. This topic is collectively called Earth Mysteries. 6. The missing flight MH370, the great 21st century mystery, conspiracy. Mystery shrouds the fate of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370, which unexpectedly disappeared with 239 passengers and crew en route to Beijing from Kuala Lumpur. Flight MH370 departed from Kuala Lumpur International Airport at 0:41 on Saturday, 16:41 GMT Friday, and was due to arrive in Beijing at 6:30. Air traffic controllers lost contact at 1:30, almost an hour after takeoff. Military officials said that Flight 370 was last detected by military radar at 2:40 a.m. local time on Saturday, near the island of Pulau Perak at the northern end of the Strait of Malacca. It was flying at an altitude of 29,500 feet. At a time during the flight, but as yet undisclosed, a relative reportedly managed to call one of the passengers, who was carrying a Singapore phone. Malaysia Airlines has repeatedly tried to call the same number but no ringtone has been heard. It was flying over the South China Sea, south of Vietnam's Camo Peninsula. The normal route would have taken it over Cambodia and Vietnam before entering Chinese airspace. No distress signal or message was sent, but it is believed the plane attempted to turn back from its scheduled path, perhaps towards Kuala Lumpur Airport. Weather conditions on this flight are said to have been good, and the experienced pilot had more than 18,000 flying hours behind him, and he had been employed by the airline since 1981. Malaysia Airlines has a very good safety record, and the jet, a Boeing 777-200er, is said to be one of the safest because of its modern technology. One of the plane's wingtips was clipped in an incident while taxiing in 2012, but it was repaired and certified as safe. No wreckage has been found despite early indications that potential debris from an aircraft had been seen about 50 miles, 80 kilometers, to the southwest of Thomas Chu Island. Both waters to the east of Malaysia, in the South China Sea, and in the Straits of Malacca, along Malaysia's west coast, are being searched. The search effort, involving at least 34 aircraft and 40 ships from several countries, was widened to a 185-kilometer radius from the point the plane vanished from radar screens between Malaysia and Vietnam after 2 days. Malaysian maritime officials found oil slicks in the South China Sea, but lab tests found that samples of it were not from an aircraft. On the second day, Sunday, a Vietnamese plane spotted a rectangular object that was thought to be one of the plane's doors, but ships could not locate it again. On Monday, a Singaporean search plane spotted a yellow object 140 kilometers southwest of Thomas Chu Island, but it turned out to be sea trash. 2 of the passengers were traveling on passports stolen in Thailand and had onward tickets to Amsterdam, Europe, but it's not known whether the 2 men had anything to do with the plane's disappearance. Criminals and illegal migrants regularly travel on fake or stolen documents. It also appears the tickets for the 2 passengers had been purchased by an Iranian man known only as Mr. Ali and the Thailand travel agents, separately. The stolen passports, one belonging to Christian Kozil of Austria and the other to Luigi Meraldi of Italy, were entered into Interpol's database after they were taken in Thailand in 2012 and 2013, the police organization said. 5 passengers who checked in for flight MH370 didn't board the plane, and their luggage was removed from it before takeoff. The 5 passengers have yet to be identified. No plane, no contact, nothing. The plane, a Boeing 777-200er, was equipped with a transponder, an inbuilt tracker which automatically relays information about the flight, such as altitude, to ground radar stations that stopped sending information. No ping has been received from the so-called indestructible black box. Crews also have discrete radio channels, and most aircraft have at least one other backup communication system. Nothing was sent through any of these channels either to indicate a problem. The plane was comfortably cruising at a height of about 35,000 feet through the night sky above the South China Sea, so there should have been enough time for the pilot, Zahri Ahmad Shah, 53, or the co-pilot, Farrakh Abdul Hamid, 27, to send a distress signal. But they did not. An airplane can also glide for as long as 30 minutes in the event of total engine failure. For all communication to suddenly stop, without a distress signal, would normally indicate some sort of sudden catastrophic failure which would not allow the crew time to send messages using the radio or through the transponder. A catastrophic failure at that height would have left some wreckage. As of yet, none has been found. Adding to the mystery, the U.S. has reviewed imagery taken by American spy satellites for evidence of a mid-air explosion, but has not found anything to locate its whereabouts. The mobile phones are still ringing. The plot has thickened after it emerged, according to reports and TV footage, that passengers' family members reported ringing victims' mobile phones. The phones rang, but nobody answered, according to a joint statement signed by 19 families. In each case, the families said, the phone would ring but the call would be hung up or ring out. The sister of one of the Chinese passengers rang his phone live on TV twice on Sunday morning and heard it ringing. She said she called again later that afternoon and heard it ring once more. Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 was last heard from at 1:20 am local time on Saturday morning, roughly 40 minutes after taking off from Kuala Lumpur en route to Beijing. The skies were clear and the plane has 239 passengers on board. Of those, 150 were Chinese, but in total 14 countries had citizens on board. We remain hopeful that new information will come to light and that at some point in the future the aircraft will be located. In December, an Australian government report found authorities had likely been looking in the wrong section of ocean. There is a high degree of confidence that the previously identified underwater area searched to date does not contain the missing aircraft, the Australian Transport Safety Bureau report said. At the time, Mr. Chester said he was still hopeful authorities would find the plane in the search area. A report released by the ATSB a month earlier found it was unlikely the Boeing 777 was in a controlled descent when it crashed into the ocean. 7. Lost Inuit Village, 1930, Roswell of the North. On a frigid night in November 1930, Canadian fur trapper Joya stumbled upon what has since been termed the Roswell of the North. The Inuit village nestled in the trees next to Lake Anjukuni contained a mystery that shook LaBelle to his core. An entire village of Inuits were gone without a trace. LaBelle found the following: a charred stew that had only recently been abandoned, huts containing large amounts of clothing and food, indicating the villagers hadn't abandoned their homes, a burial ground in which several graves had been unearthed and emptied, and a pack of sled dogs, which had been starved to death, buried under 12 feet of snow. LaBelle went to the nearest telegraph office and sent a message to the Canadian Mounted Police, who embarked upon what would become almost a century of unanswered questions concerning what happened to an entire village of 2,000 industrious Inuits. They've since conveniently dismissed the entire case as an urban legend. Probably the creepiest part of this story is that on the night of the disappearance, there were separate reports by Mounties of a blue light traveling along the horizon. Trapper Armin Laron and his two sons reported an unidentified object that changed shape from a cylinder into a bullet-like object and seemed headed in the general direction of the Anjukuni village. The story has been challenged by many skeptics, who claim LaBelle himself grossly exaggerated his story, or simply made it up. Other skeptics say the story was made up by Frank Edwards in his 1959 book Stranger Than Science.